Do you want to apologize to me? I know. Asking you to apologize in front of other people.
Apologize for what?
Or you just got shown up by the host. That you smeared me by saying that I was trying to get out of something or change the goalposts.
You were trying.
No, I wasn't.
You were trying because now, look, we're getting down to brass tacks here.
Yeah, I know.
It looks like he's not showing up.
Right.
You're worried about eating the hat. So you're trying to just kind of change the language a little bit.
I just said I said the same thing I said the first day. What have I said differently? Unless if you want to troll just to say you're trolling, that's fine. We can just move past that and get to Albert Breer.
I think we should just get to Albert.
Okay. Hi, Albert. How are you, sir? You there, Albert Breer?
I'm doing great, Rich. And I'm gonna I heard you guys laughing at the end, and I wasn't paying attention, so I'm sorry. I can't respond to what you just said.
No, it's all good. Well, I guess we'll start off our conversation. Albert Breer of the MMQB here on the Rich Eisen Show. I said to Mike Del Tufo when Zeke didn't show up at Cowboys camp that if he is a healthy guy on the planet, not suspended, and he's got every ability to be the starting running back for the Dallas Cowboys, but if he's not there as a starting running back because he's holding out, I would eat the hat off of Mike Del Tufo's head. I'm genuinely concerned about that. Do I eat a hat in week 1 of the NFL season, do you think?
I think eventually they're going to come to an agreement, and I think it probably happens before week 1. Just based on the Cowboys' track record and history, we've seen this bluster before. We've seen the back and forth publicly before because everything's public with the Cowboys. And ultimately, I can't come up with too many examples of them not getting deals done. I mean, we saw this sort of back and forth between the team and DeMarcus Lawrence in the spring, and ultimately that one got done. And that was a difficult deal to do, too. That was over $20 million a year. Ultimately, I think where the Cowboys are now is close to what Todd Gurley got. I think if push comes to shove, they may be willing to inch past what Todd Gurley got. And if they do that, I think it's going to be very difficult for Ezekiel Elliott to walk away. Look, I know how valuable he is. I know what sort of weapon he is. I know, he may look at, say, Julio Jones getting $20 or $21 or $22 million in the next few weeks and say, I deserve to be paid like that guy. But ultimately, he's a running back, and, those guys age in dog years. And so if he's offered something that's a tick more than what Todd Gurley gets, my sense is he would probably accept it.
Do you see any sort of foreseeable fix for whatever's going on with Melvin Gordon and the Chargers, however, Albert?
I think that one's more difficult. I think the offer that the Chargers have put on the table is a fair one, right in the $10 million per year range. I think, Melvin Gordon's opinion of himself is probably a little inflated, and I think the issue he has is the issue a lot of running backs have. And here's why I think Zeke and Gurley and, Saquon, I think those guys are in a different category. The new prototype for the running back in the NFL is a 225-pound guy who can play on all 3 downs. And the top tier in the NFL at that position is much smaller than it is at other positions, right? There's only a few guys like that. And then the second tier is much larger than it is at other positions. It's in the top tier. I think Gordon's in the second tier. And we saw that with how the Chargers were able to replace him last year. And so, I think Gordon's resolve to make a stand here, and I don't think Zeke getting paid would necessarily help matters between him and the team. I also know the Chargers are pretty strong in their stance, in where they are right now, and feeling that what they have on the table is pretty fair. And so I would not be surprised one bit if Gordon's holdout last in the season. I think it's more likely than Zeke's holdout going into the season.
All right, then let's complete the trifecta of the, off-the-field stories that many people have been talking about in the NFL, and that's the helmet affair for Antonio Brown. Mm-hmm. He is in Canada, I do believe, right, Chris Brockman? He's in Canada right now with the team. Getting set to take on the Packers tonight. I think helmets are 10% more potent up there in Canada. So we'll see.
Moonshine.
I don't think he's going to get out there tonight. But just the fact that he's there doesn't mean that this is all over, right? I mean, where do things stand right here on this front?
Well, I think they still got to figure out what helmet he's going to wear when the season starts. But I do think that the worst is in the rearview mirror. And I think a big part of this is the way that the Raiders sort of stood by him, and outside of Mike doing what he did on that Sunday where, He kind of drew a line in the sand. The Raiders have very much, been in AB's corner on this. I think he understood why Mayock did what he had to do there. And, I just tell you, Rich, like the verbiage, like that you hear coming out of there, and when you talk to people in that organization last year versus this year, is 100% different. Last year, I remember talking to John Gruden about the roster, and this is wrong, and that's wrong. We need to fix this, and we need to fix that. We won't have a chance if this doesn't happen. And this year you go there, and there's just more ownership of everything. There's more ownership of every player in the roster. And I think that's a subtle but obvious difference if you're looking for it, where you really see where Gruden has embraced Antonio Brown as his. And I think that was apparent on Hard Knocks the other night. And certainly I think it's apparent to Antonio Brown and how he's handled this whole thing.
Yeah, but the one part of Antonio Brown on Hard Knocks that I would love to have seen, and I understand perhaps why we didn't, where it was what in fact did happen to go from the hunky-dory, they're kind of strolling off together, the practice field, Antonio Brown and John Gruden, like the end of Casablanca, right? Yeah. And it's the beginning of a beautiful friendship, and then he doesn't show up the next day, and Mayock shows up at the media tent to talk about all in, all out. There's 89 guys, there's one other guy.
Yep.
What in the world happened there? And when you say the worst is over, is that all bottled up? Like, because nobody saw it being unbottled over that 24-hour period. We didn't see the deliberations that led to Mayock showing up at the media tent.
Well, he lost his grievance is what happened. And, I think that whatever delusion he had about that, because I think most people didn't think he had a shot at winning the grievance. Losing the grievance, I think, was sort of what caused a lot of that, and the realization that, he was going to have to go out there in a different helmet. And I know it sounds small to all of us, but the one thing I think anyone in the Steelers organization that dealt with in the last 9 years would tell you, it's always the little things that set AB off. And if you want to look back just to last year, not winning the team MVP award is what caused him to storm off in Week 17 and miss that last game of the year with the playoffs on the line. And so it's just always been that way with him, where little things, whether they're slights, or he feels disrespected, whatever it might be, like those little things have always been the things that have set him off. And I mean, for the Raiders, here's the thing: he is who he is. He's in his 30s. You paid him. You gave him $30 million guaranteed. You know what you signed up for. And so, I think his reaction to this sort of thing, while it seems weird when you take it kind of in a vacuum, really falls in line with everything that he was in Pittsburgh and the issues that the Steelers had with him. And so I think, Mike did what he had to do, getting out there and saying, like, we're not going to be dealing with this on a day-to-day basis this way. But I think that the Raiders also knew that this is a part of what they signed up for when they traded for him last year.
Well, before we move on from this, then Albert, is there is another grievance that's coming, right? Over whether he can he can get the 1 year grace period for his helmet that everybody else that had red helmets last year got last year. And the arbiter, I guess, who was hearing this will have to decide, is that a rolling 1 year grace period for whoever raises their hand and say, hey, I want to wear a red helmet now that wasn't tested the year before. If suddenly somebody raises their hand and say, I want to wear a leather helmet, give me a 1 year grace period on that. Obviously I'm using an extreme example. So there's another grievance coming. And there's one thing I haven't really seen any specific reporting on. Mm-hmm. What is his issue with the helmet, like the new helmet? Like, why doesn't what exactly is it? Is it because I'm hearing that field of vision is an issue? Another thing that I saw in Hard Knocks is it sounded like he thought it just didn't look good. Like he didn't look good in it, or it didn't look good or cool. Yep. What is it? Do we know?
Yeah, and I think field of vision is definitely an issue. I know that came up with Brady too, and Brady has, and one thing that's sort of gone unreported here, Brady has gone back and forth with helmets over the last 5 or 6 years. Like if you look really closely over the last 5 or 6 years, you can find individual games where Brady switched out of the helmet that he's worn, the model that he's worn really since he was a rookie, into other helmets, and then ultimately, a week or two later, he'll switch back. I think as much as anything else, it's a comfort thing. And, I think that there's a lot that plays into comfort for players. There's the whole, Deion thing, you look good, you play good, you get paid good, right? So there's that part of it. I think there's a piece of all of this. And then I think the functionality of the helmet, too, is a part of it. Just, feeling like yourself out there, And so I think that, again, this plays back into that little things set him off. He is very particular about the way he trains. He's very particular about the way that he looks. He's very particular about everything. It's just who he is, part of what makes him who he is as a player. And so I think it would, my feeling on it, just having talked to people who, have been involved in this, is that it's a comfort issue that sort of encapsulates a lot of those different things that go into, players' comfort level out there on the field with the equipment they're wearing.
Albert Breer, the MMQB, right here on the Rich Eisen Show. Albert, last time we saw you when you were here in studio, and you were more bronze than the busts that we saw later on that week in Canton. And you went through all your training camps. That's how you got that nice George Hamilton tan that you got going on. You talked about Andrew Luck. You had just seen him, and how the leg was beginning to bother him more than anybody thought it would. And now here we are, preseason week 3. He's not even practicing, Albert. What's going on here with Luck?
Oh, I regret to inform you the tan's sort of worn off now, Rich. So I guess
get back out there, Albert. Got to get back out there.
I know. I would tell you, the Colts have been pretty upfront about this stuff.
About your tan?
Both privately and publicly. I think that there's an element of just not knowing exactly what it was. They referred to it as a calf. When I sat down with Andrew at camp, he kept referring to it as his ankle. And even when I brought up the idea of a calf injury, he kind of pivoted back to ankle. And the nomenclature that they used with me when I made some calls on it about a week ago was, we need to just let this thing calm down. And so, you put the pieces together and you say calf and ankle and, the wording calm down. A lot of times with athletes that plays into Achilles. But I don't think they're 100% sure, what I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure they know exactly what they're looking at. And so, that piece of it, I think, has been frustrating for the team. It's been frustrating for the player. And the other thing that I would mention here with Luck, he completely overhauled his mechanics last year. He worked with Tom House and Adam Dado and those guys out there in Orange County to sort of remake his delivery a little bit, coming off the shoulder surgery. And part of the idea there was, we're going to make sure that this doesn't happen again, with his, by tightening up his throwing motion and cleaning up his mechanics. And, sometimes that can lead to other problems. And so, I hesitate to point the finger there, but, that could be another area where you could be looking at something where it's one thing maybe threw off another, and now you've got a problem somewhere else where you were trying to take care of the previous problem in doing all of this.
Before I let you go, Albert, I started the show by saying 6 preseason games tonight, and you've got guys that normally we would see play the entire first half into the third quarter. Brady, Rodgers, Ryan, obviously Cam Newton. I just off the top of my head, obviously. With the collective bargaining agreement conversations going on behind the scenes, and I'm told that there's more bargaining sessions set for next week, and the conversation of the preseason being on the line, and what we've seen already, where hardly anybody's playing. Give me a top-down look on what we're going to be seeing tonight in general about the future of the preseason, Albert.
Well, I think there are a couple things to look for. I mean, obviously the rookie quarterbacks, I think, are always center stage for the preseason. So getting to see a little more of Daniel Jones in New York and Dwayne Haskins in Washington, there are some reasons still to tune in. I take you to a conversation I had with the coach about this and his approach to it. And he was from a team that had 2 sets of joint practices. So, 2 joint practices with one team, 2 joint practices with another team. And he told me, he's like, there's a ton of benefit for me to just put my guys out there here and not put them out there in the preseason games. He explained I get 50 game reps in each of these practices for my starters. So that's a total of 200 game reps, which is more than they would get in a typical preseason schedule, all 4 games. He said on top of that, we get to run all our real stuff. Like, we're not holding stuff back because this tape isn't going out to anyone else. And so we're going to run all the stuff we're going to run in the regular season, and we get to test stuff out, based on what we want to see and what we want to see from guys ahead of week 1 in that environment, which is a great benefit, right? then you get to control it. And so, that cuts down the chance there's going to be a catastrophic injury out there. And then, you're working with the other coaches, so there's opportunity to maybe generate matchups and work together with the other team to see certain guys in certain spots. And so his whole point was you put all that together, and he's like, why would I expose my players to anything in the preseason when I've got the opportunity to get them out there in these joint practices and get a much better look, a better environment, a better chance to get a look at our real team, all that stuff put together. Why would I play these guys in preseason games if I can get that in the joint practices? And so, Rich, I think the answer here is finding a way to market those joint practices, because those are a great take for the fans, too. I don't know if you've been to any of them, but they're a great take for the fans, too. The coaches love them. So maybe there's a way out there where they can find a way to market and profit off the joint practices, have each team do at least a couple of those, and maybe that's the way that you take a couple of preseason games off the schedule. Because certainly I don't think anybody looks at preseason games and says that's the product the NFL wants to put out there.
Albert, now, before I let you go, do you have anything on Patrick Chung other than just the news that came out of New Hampshire that broke in the last hour?
Yeah, no, it's very clear that this was, something that happened a couple months ago. And there was a report out there about this being part of a larger drug raid. And, there's some back and forth there. But, clearly, the Patriots have already addressed it, that they're looking into it.
Okay.
Look, it's not what you're looking for on the day of your third preseason game. It's certainly going to be a news topic up in here in Boston over the next couple of days.
Albert, great stuff as always. Check out Albert's 32 notes from 32 NFL training camps. None of the notes about, unfortunately, his fading raging tan that he got doing all that. Good to chat with you, Albert.
Well, I'll get out there and work on that for you, Rich.
Always enjoy our chats. We'll chat soon, okay, bud? Thanks for the
thanks,
call.
Bud.
You got it.
Appreciate
That's Albert Breer at Albert Breer on Twitter.
For more of The Rich Eisen Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV for free on BR Live or download the Rich Eisen Show app.